Our next sessions, or rather our next two sessions, involves the area of newspapers in education. Yeah, and the first session in this area is entitled "The Future of Academic Libraries" and will be presented by Mr. Matthew Hendrick, the Senior Area Manager for Libraries Asia Pacific press reader based in Australia. Mr. Matthew has over 10 years of experience working across the publishing and technology industries. He has worked for companies such as Fairfax Media, News Corp, and Hardy Grant Publishing in Melbourne, Australia. The next session after him is actually entitled "Providing Worthwhile Content for Today's Young and Hungry Minds," which will be presented by Mr. Stephen Keane, the founder and chief editor of Newsbites Media based in Canada. Having worked in primary education for the last 18 years, 8 as a teacher, 10 as a publisher, Mr. Stephen knows the value of reading and the importance of young people growing up to be informed citizens. And these two sessions will be moderated by Associate Professor Dr. Hariharan and Krishnasamy, who is an advisor for JALTA. In an educational career spanning more than 30 years, he has taught several courses including academic writing, semantics, and social linguistics. He has been involved in soft skills training programs for students and conducted courses on intercultural communication, public speaking, as well as the use of IT for teaching purposes. So first, over to Mr. Matthew, and then we'll move to Mr. Stephen, and finally it'll be with Associate Professor for the moderating of the session. Over to you guys.
Hello and welcome. My name is Matthew Hedrick. I am the Senior Area Manager at Pressreader. For those out there that don't know what Pressreader is or have never heard of Pressreader, we are a newspaper and magazine catalogue servicing the library industry all across the globe. So that could be the government, public, as well as the academic libraries. Pressreader houses over 7,000 different newspapers and magazines from 150 different countries in 70 different languages. Now today I'm very excited to speak to you guys about the future of the academic library and how academic libraries can succeed in the COVID world that we find ourselves in. So I'm going to start with a bold but true statement that librarians are always right. So back in 2012, OCLC conducted a survey in the USA, which found that most academic libraries thought the primary reason students and staff would use their services, so borrowing materials, would actually shift from the brick and mortar library to an online experience. Now, with this, when COVID hit, those institutes and those schools that had already shifted to an online presence were so much better prepared when COVID hit, and they were able to adapt to the new world that we were all living in. But unfortunately, there's not enough academic libraries that had made that shift and were thinking about the student and the experiences that they were going through with COVID, and they're being more wrapped up in their own priorities. Now, these priorities were always driven by what a library should be, the brick and mortar. Every priority listed in this survey here are all internal library goals rather than a student or a faculty goal, and the goals that they should be based on their experience. While it's clear that libraries and librarians emphasize on the capabilities of research and one-on-one education, they're not as concerned with the overall user experience. And now this has become more and more evident today with the COVID world that we live in. And a academic library that really shifted the way that they were delivering information was the Johns Hopkins University through COVID. So even with the empty campuses, librarians took it on themselves to check in with the student, to actually try and deliver that content to them when they needed it. So if there was a resource that the student that needed, the librarians would actually go and get it for them and deliver it to them online. But the problem is that not every single academic library has the resources that the Johns Hopkins University has. Not everyone can jump on a phone and spend that time with each student to deliver them an experience and deliver that content to them. And that's the thing. There has been a dramatic change in the way people discover and access content now. If you look at how we consume our media, how we consume videos, music, news, journals, and magazines, it's all about the experience. It's all about the instant gratification. It's all about relevancy, perspective, and trust. And so the thing is that there's two things that brings this together. That is the technology, the choice, and the convenience. And because there's been a massive dramatic change in the way that people discover and access content, there's been a shift and it's had a major impact on how business models and across many industries have been transformed. So you go from owning to sharing. So you go from buying things to buying experiences. You go from paying for the whole to paying for a piece. You go from having an individual subscription to an all-you-consume subscription. COVID-19 was the catalyst, and libraries really do need to shift gears now. They need to be thinking about the way that humans behave and access content, because if they don't adapt to this, they will be left behind. Brick and mortar libraries are consistently competing with the Googles, with the search engines of our life. And unless we adapt and offer different online resources to our students, the library is going to be left behind and become redundant. So think about all the schools at the moment that have brought all their classes online due to COVID. They are still making themselves relevant in this COVID world that we're living in. So what I want you guys to think about is, how do you see your own library fitting in this scenario? And how will you adapt to an online resource? So online classes is not the same as a physical class, but unfortunately, in the COVID world that we live in, sometimes this isn't possible, and the academic community is adapting to this. But in the past, libraries thought that offering a few selected printed magazines lying around the library with some newspapers was sufficient to support the student body as well as the faculty. But unfortunately, that isn't enough in today's climate. The expectations are higher. So just like Netflix answered it for video, and Spotify for music, and Amazon did for books, Press Reader has for newspapers and magazines. If I can work from home, children can learn from home, or students can learn from home. The technology is already here, and Press Reader can aggregate content based on that student's likes and dislikes. So, and they can access it from home. So they can do it through URL referrals. They can do it through barcode authentication. So like a library card and that type of thing. And that is what's great about machine learning. They can give the right content at the right time. It's specific to the individual, as like Netflix is and Spotify is. It's your section. So the way that this can work is a strategy that is preferred by a majority of people, particularly the younger or the tech-savvy ones. And people who use news aggregators believe that algorithms help them find a broader range of content, that brands that are based on their interests and preferences, and information that is more on topic and driven, that is not bias guided. And the source of the habit ultimately is convenience. So it's the job of you guys, the academic library, to recommend or bring the right content to the students. Now the question is, how should you guys as librarians adapt, or libraries adapt? You guys need to start thinking outside the box and start looking at ways that you guys can adapt to ensure that the library is not forgotten about. And the way that you can do that is by switching gears. Go from a collection-centric institution to a person-centric experience, and offer a platform or office a service that is more guided by the person's interest or the student's interest itself. Now it is time for you guys to take charge as librarians in these current times. So start looking at investing in comprehensive and more user-friendly platforms that can help students navigate through an ocean of data and discover the right content when they need it. Inspire, entertain, and engage. Become a central hub that facilitates learning in all its forms, so that it could be face-to-face, experimental, or online. It could be peer-to-peer or even peer-to-faculty collaboration and sharing. Become an experimental destination where the act of discovery is exciting and educational. Foster a sense of community within your library and take it online outside the physical library itself. So guys, there's no need to reinvent the wheel here. Look around. A lot of you guys have those foundations necessary to make it all happen. It's not about rebuilding the libraries from the ground up. It's about adapting to what libraries are already doing and evolving to think about the user as the me generations, where personalized experiences and services are in high demand. This quote here was taken from our CEO of Press Reader International, Nikolai Melderov, which librarians need to get the right content in front of the right student at the right time through the right channels. How fitting is this in this COVID world that we live in? The COVID era is a big hurdle to overcome. If academic libraries are willing to adapt to one of the biggest changes in our industry, they're prepared for anything else in the future. Thank you so much for your time today. You've been great.
Hello everybody, my name is Stephen Keane. I'm coming to you all the way from Ireland, nice and sunny Ireland, which makes a change in this part of the world. And I'm delighted to be part of the Digital Education Odyssey. So the overall theme of our talks are newspapers in education. And that's why I'm here, because I am co-founder and chief editor at Newsbites Media. It's a publishing company based here in Ireland and in Singapore. The company was a result of a collaboration between two publishing entities, ourselves, Newsmag Media, and the English Corner in Singapore. English Corner publishes STEM and science comics for young readers, and we publish monthly children's educational news mags. So I say educational because they're curriculum linked, but they have everything that a newspaper or a news mag would have. So the partnership formed from, I suppose, a shared passion or desire to get children reading and to get children reading for pleasure. Both myself and Betty, we would have a huge passion and a huge belief in the power of reading and in the power of reading for pleasure. And that really formed the cornerstone in the mission for Newsbites Media, what it is that we wanted to do. So if we look at three words, engage, inform, and inspire. So our mission, when we said that we'd set up the newspaper, it was very important that we would find readers. So I suppose that's where education comes in. The school is the perfect place to find readers of all kinds, reluctant, avid, emerging, marginalized even. So we set about using that as our base so that we would go to schools and we would offer a newspaper to the students. The next part of our mission was to inform, and that was to get writers of excellent quality from all around the world to pitch in and to deliver content that is worthwhile, it's safe, it's valuable, and it is of use to the children, in that, you know, we could every month, as we all are aware, there's lots of negative news, but we were determined to focus on positive news. If we're going to inform children of news, we'd inform them of news that's worthwhile and that's worthy, and that brings a message of hope, of goodness, of kindness, all these kind of good things that are going on in the world. And that led us on to the third part, which is to inspire. So we firmly believe, as does many people in our area of publishing, that readers of today become the leaders of tomorrow. So we felt that if we were able to create a newspaper that would inspire the children to A, to read, and B, to maybe follow suit, follow the examples of the people that we feature in our newspapers, that would lead to a brighter future. And that is really the mission of Newsbites. When I'm asked what makes us at Newsbites tick, or what drives us, I think we can put it down to a quote I read a number of years ago, and it came from an OECD report on reading for pleasure. And when I heard this, and when I read it, and when I researched it and saw that it was true, it became a huge part of our mission of supplying content, of creating a reading resource that children would actually love to pick up, put down, pick up again, put down, but read throughout the month. And the statement from the OECD reads this: reading for pleasure is the single biggest indicator of a child's future success. More than family circumstances, more than parents' educational background, or more than income. Like, that's a massive thing for us, to think that reading for pleasure is the biggest indicator of a child's success. Now, there are loads and many resources that fall under the umbrella of reading for pleasure, and we're delighted to be able to stand behind a newspaper that we believe encourages and inspires reading for pleasure. Books, magazines, comics, there's a plethora of resources out there, and that is great. The more, the merrier. But for us, a newspaper, we felt, would be able to deliver on a number of things. So if you look at the choice that a newspaper offers, if you look at the different items of interest, the different sized articles, and all of these lend themselves to supplying choice to a myriad of readers. As I said, you might have an avid reader who will read the newspaper from page 1 to page 24 non-stop, never take their head out of the newspaper. You might have a reluctant reader who'll flick and skip and maybe just read our bite-sized facts. You might have a reader who is marginalized in the sense that they may have dyslexia. And that is why we go to the trouble of recording some of our articles and putting them up on our website so that the digital world and the print world work in tandem to deliver a resource for everybody, to deliver a resource so that everybody can read it and get great enjoyment out of doing so. We sometimes hear from teachers that while they would love to get a newspaper for their pupils or to subscribe to a newspaper, that they don't have the time to do so, or the curriculum is already loaded, or they have textbooks to complete or workbooks to complete. And we totally empathize. Of course, there's huge pressures on teachers and on schools to get X amount of work done in the year. But I think it's very important that we shift this idea of a newspaper for children being a luxury to a newspaper for children being a necessity. Now, it's a necessity for many reasons, but even if we just focus on the reading for pleasure element, if reading for pleasure is the biggest indicator of a child's success, we really need, as educators, as parents, we need to commit to supplying or providing content for our children to read. Again, digital, print, it doesn't matter. Books, novels, instruction manuals, comics, magazines, it really doesn't matter what it is that they read once they're reading for pleasure. So it's very important for us to convince or to say to schools to make space in your day. If a child reads for pleasure on the bus to and from school, box ticked. You know, you're succeeding in providing them with content that they're going to turn to by their own choice and get enjoyment out of. So again, it's really, really important for us to stress that no matter how busy a school landscape is or the educational demands are, to have a newspaper, in our case, we have the newspaper and website, to have it available for your children, for your pupils, will go a long way in inspiring this reading for pleasure that is so important. I can list some reasons to have newspapers, not necessarily Newsbites, to have a newspaper available for the children. Now, one, it's to encourage children to read for a purpose. So providing opportunities for them to engage with the world around them, but in a safe and secure manner. And this is done through the reporting of trustworthy news from trustworthy news writers. This whole world of fake news is really, really important to address and to acknowledge as real. So if you know that you have a newspaper coming in that is of a very trustworthy nature, then giving the children reasons to read, to find out about what's happening in the world and to inform them of what's happening in the world, that's a hugely beneficial reason and a great reason to get a newspaper under their noses. To develop, we don't need to talk much more, I'd imagine, on the importance of developing love of reading for pleasure, but also by having a newspaper in education, you are nurturing a love of current affairs, of history, indeed of geography, of STEM, of all these different interesting and informative areas of learning. And these speak directly to the children in a language they understand when it is presented in a newspaper that is written solely for them. You get to promote and inspire a feeling of pride in the reader, because what we do is we commit to reporting on their community or on their country by highlighting that positive news and focusing on positive role models. If the young readers don't have a newspaper to tell them about all the great work, volunteering, activism and good that's going on in the world today, well then where do they read all this? Also, to have newspapers in education is to provide a safe medium for children to access the information. With other magazines and newspapers for young readers full of advertising and product promotion, that was one of the reasons why we at Newsbites decided, no, let's stay clear of advertising. Let's just make this 100% for the children. And that is a big decision, and it has repercussions on the financial side of things for any publisher. But I think if we can convince schools to take Newsbites on board or to embrace newspapers in education, that might go a long way in hitting those targets of reading for pleasure and of providing safe and secure content. And lastly, it's to create a website. Well, the reason we decided to go down the route of inserting QR codes into our newspaper was to embrace the digital, which every child is very familiar with now and probably demands at this stage. So if something doesn't have a digital aspect to it, maybe you're going to lose the child at the door, rather than say to them, yeah, this is print, but come on in, have a look. You'll see that there are digital elements that you're able to enjoy and that are there for value and that can supply extra valuable content to them. So to create a safe and secure online platform is a very important part of our mission here at Newsbites as well. And there it provides a forum for independent thought, opinion, further reading, comprehension, and as I mentioned before, audio loaded articles that might just help that reader who struggles with the written word. So they are some of the reasons for Newsbites. I hope that throughout the presentation it hasn't came across as a sale pitch for Newsbites. We're passionate about newspapers. If it's our newspaper, super. If it's another newspaper, that's fine. But it's a commitment from schools to embrace newspapers in their educational landscape or in their framework or in their planning, because newspapers, they do a huge amount of good if they're well written. Okay, guys, I've ran slightly over time, so apologies on that. But I suppose I just hope that from listening to me that you will get a sense of our passion for reading for pleasure, and how we believe newspapers are one of the key resources to enable that and to provide opportunities for reading for pleasure. Thank you very much. Again, apologies for going a few minutes over the time. I hope you have a brilliant conference. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Hi, Prof. Would you like to ask the questions to moderate the questions to the participants? To both Mr. Matthew and Mr. Stephen.
Yes. Thank you very much, Ida.
Mm-hmm.
That was really there was so much of information there. Very useful information, very interesting, and a very strong message. It's not time to write the obituary for the newspapers, as some people would put it. It's still very much alive, and there's a lot of information there. And I found several, these are really quotable quotes, very, very interesting from Mr. Matthew and Stephen. Content without discovery is like playing chess without a board. I thought that was very interesting, the comparison. Librarians are always right. Readers of today become the leaders of tomorrow. Fantastic, very good ideas. And of course, fake news and the newspapers, they touched on a lot of things. So let me forward the questions from the participants. Quite a number, but we'll go by the time. I think Ida can sound it to me if it's going beyond the time limit. First question. How do you think tech companies such as Press Reader will support the publishing industry in the future?
Good question. I suppose that's directed at me, not Steve. Really interesting question, because obviously as we're living in this age at the moment where a lot of the big publishers are consolidating their regional newspapers or their smaller newspapers into their main mastheads, they're finding that they're not getting as much reach into the communities. And so my is, and that I've really, a lot of thought in my years of working in the publishing industry, is that companies like PressReader, who are able to give publishers reach to different readers from all over the globe, you know, in Malaysia can read the Australian newspaper or the Herald Sun. They can get new eyeballs and new readers and people actually following the news. And if we are able to support the publishers and give them that reach, and being able to support them by compensation and actually giving them a new revenue stream to be able to invest in quality journalism. You know, I was listening to Steve before, and what Steve was talking about with how, you know, children of today really need quality journalism. They need great role models and that type of stuff. And I find that if we are able, as a company, being able to support with those compensation, they'll be able to invest into quality journalism and get rid of that fake news tagline that's been thrown out there. Obviously, we don't want to be very one-centric and cut off every different types of the political landscape. But I believe that, you know, we can support the publishing industry and open up new ways of delivering content to people and opening up those new revenue streams.
Thank you very much. A very good answer to the question. The next one, we'll move on to the next question. What, in your opinion, makes a children's newspaper the preferred reading resource? I repeat, what, in your opinion, makes a children's newspaper the preferred reading resource?
Hi there, Professor. Thanks for the question. Well, I suppose because I'm a publisher, a newspaper publisher, we would obviously see this as the preferred method. But if we're just to take it back a step, I would say that anything to get children reading is of use. But if we look at a newspaper, by its very nature, it adheres to every kind of taste, every kind of interest. So we often imagine our readers might be a young boy from the countryside, and he dreams of owning a sports car. So the first thing he'll do is he'll jump to the sports section. And if he reads nothing else apart from the sports section, I think by having a newspaper in front of him, there's a great possibility that he'll start developing other interests. Whereas with the likes of a novel, it's very one-dimensional. So if that same boy comes upon a novel and it's about fairies in forests, he might say, yeah, no, that's not for me. I have nothing here that's to interest me. So with regards to a newspaper, I would see that it offers a huge amount of topics for every interest and for every type of reader. So one reader might like to read a 3-page feature. Another reader might like to read what we call our bite-sized facts. So just the very nature of a newspaper offers a huge amount of gateways to learning and to the interest levels of the children. And that's why I would say that a newspaper is the ideal, or at least one of the ideal resources for promoting reading for pleasure and reading for information.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. No? One of the ideal resources and a gateway to different types of reading and a different length, different areas. Okay, for the final question. This is something related to giving advice or your opinion. No? What do you say to schools and teachers who claim that they don't have the time to incorporate a children's newspaper into their already packed schedules?
Yeah, we get this a lot. I actually touched upon it in the presentation. You know, I'm a past teacher, a former teacher, so I totally understand and empathize with the demands of today's school landscape. You know, scores and doors, there's a huge amount of pressure to reach the end of a syllabus or to cover all the areas in the curriculum. And of course, tests, exams, all of that. We totally get that. But I suppose if you go back to what the OECD says, and that is that if reading for pleasure is one of the greatest indicators of success, then I don't know if schools or teachers have a choice in the matter. I think they need to allow any resource that promotes reading in. Now, whether or not they're going to use that as, let's say, a staple part of their teaching in a week or in a month, that's up to them. But what we would hope they would see is that if you brought in Newsbites, or if you brought in any newspaper through Press Reader, through any platform that there is available, they will start seeing that children have this natural hunger for information. And once they're engaging in any written or any reading resource, again, newspaper, magazine, comic, whatever it is, it starts opening up this whole world of discussion, of independent thought. And that is really the quintessential qualities of a good classroom. So we laugh, you know, a lot of the material that's in Newsbites, teachers will learn new stuff from, not just the children, and they might begin to learn where the children are coming from or where their interest lies. So I would say that if a teacher is under pressure, we fully understand that, but give the children the choice of reading and let them decide when they read. And eventually, if a newspaper or a magazine or a book indeed is good enough, it will start making impressions into the classroom life. And that's, so my advice would be, let the children read newspapers, let them read all they can, let them find the time. And if it's good enough, you as a teacher or as a school will allow for that time as well.
Well said. Thank you very much. That was highly informative, very motivating, and it linked to all the previous talks and the ideas that were put across regarding reading and encouraging students, researchers, and everybody else to read. Thank you very much. So I hand over to you, Ida.
Thank you, Prof. Hariharan. And thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Stephen. This was really, really good.